Joining me now to discuss this more is Sky News contributor Gary Hardgrave. Gary, who's going to prevail here? This is really a sign of the political realignment we are seeing in so many areas in this country and in the US, in the UK, where Labor, the Democrats, Labor in the UK are really abandoning their traditional supporters, the working class, the union workers, and preoccupied with the concerns of activists in the inner cities.
Yeah, and, Rita, I actually made this in a speech in 2007 in the House of Reps, so to my mind there's nothing new with this. Labor have walked away from the working class, the workers of Australia, a generation ago. I had an uncle who was a trade union official within the ETU, and he said to me, where my politics lies, he said, but I can't stand them now. This was 20-odd years ago, and he started voting Liberal because he just could not stand where Labor had got to. So, put that, in the back of your mind. They have forgotten about the working men and women of Australia a long time ago, and they're just going for the woke activists. And I don't get what the pardon the mixed and tortured metaphor, the beef about the salmon industry is, Rita, because, this salmon industry has been built over the last couple of decades. I remember when I was a minister in the Howard government, we actually worked closely with the Tasmanian salmon industry to bring in experts from overseas, bring in skilled people who understood how to grow salmon, wild river salmon specialists, to actually give the salmon that's grown in Tasmanian rivers and waters the real edge that they've now got. And it's I think there's much more than hundreds of people impacted by this. There's literally thousands of people that are going to be hurt by this kind of decision. And, on top of that, there's all this new infrastructure that's been built into northern Tasmania, new port facilities, new airports, new flights. I mean, all these things that are happening, and it all comes because there's activity there. And the AWU is right. But, seriously, the Labor Party are more worried about the various vested interests of the elite friends of the people who, want to be offended on behalf of others. And by the way, the irony is they're all looking for salmon for Christmas because they don't eat meat, right? So they'll want salmon on their Christmas plate. And here they are killing off homegrown, Australian-grown, Tasmanian-grown salmon. And what are they going to use? Imported stuff? I mean, it's just one of the many industries, which is why Tanya Plibersek is a walking, talking sovereign risk to investment in Australia. She's bad news.
Wow, and we've got the whole other aspect there, the leadership tensions that exist between her and Anthony Albanese. There's a discussion for another day. Now, there was a must-read piece in today's Herald Sun. Award-winning sports journalist Michael Warner has written about how woke and hypocritical the AFL is. He writes of the AFL's endless virtue signalling. He said persistent welcome to country ceremonies, pride rounds, pre-match knee dropping and race baiting doesn't unite Australians. It creates a growing level of resentment, turning us against each other. He also wrote about how football's capture by the woke movement has really always reeked of hypocrisy. He asked, the AFL is currently defending itself vigorously against a racism class action led by Indigenous North Melbourne great Phil Cracker. But how does that correlate with its public undertakings to believe all First Nations players? And Gary, there is more hypocrisy from the AFL. The AFL Commission Chair, Richard Goyder, you'd know him from his work at Qantas, he pushed clubs to reduce their dependency on poker machine revenues. But at the same time, he's overseen a boom in the AFL's lucrative relationship with sports betting agencies. The hypocrisy, the woke virtue signalling, the incoherent just grandstanding, it really is a turn-off for fans, but is it going to be enough to actually impact crowd numbers, people watching the game? Because people love the sport. They're going to watch regardless.
Yeah, and look, Rita, the tribalism of AFL is about the suburbs of Melbourne and the suburbs of Sydney, Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane. I mean, it really is. That's the tribalism. And, I'm in Brisbane. The Brisbane Lions are Fitzroy Lions. I kind of understand it. I bonded with Harry Scullin when he was, Harry Jenkins, rather, when he was the member for Scullin, and he was a mad Fitzroy supporter, so therefore he and I agreed on that, if nothing else. He was on the left of Labor and I wasn't, of course. But, I get it. I understand the tribalism, and I understand enough of the history of it to think it's actually terrific. But you know what? Everybody cheers him on. A mad mate of mine loves Richmond, and when Richmond drops out, he backs the Brisbane Lions. Another friend of mine loves Collingwood, and he's always looking for friends some years, and other years he's got plenty of them. I mean, this is really what the AFL should be doing. But to find ways to divide people based around their personal, ethnic or religious circumstances, that's crazy. It's the Australian Football League. It should be about Australia, not the WFL, the Woke Football League. They've gone the wrong way. They want to go into division rather than to highlight how each person's diversity has common ground and the strengths that come from that. It is wrong. It's crazy. All the welcomes to country are really doing a lot of people in. I hear this groan on every Qantas flight when they welcome me to my own country. And I think people feel the same way at football matches. We want no politics in football. We just want football in football. Easy.
The sport appears to have been captured, hijacked by the left, and I think you're seeing that increasingly at many clubs as well as at league headquarters.
Yep.
Now, going to the US, there's a 520-page report from the US House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, and this will shock you, Gary, but they've concluded that the COVID-19 virus did indeed originate from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Who would have thought that we knew it came from Wuhan, and then we knew there was a lab there that was investigating coronaviruses, and for many months we were told that any suggestion that those two things were connected was a wild conspiracy theory that was completely groundless and in fact racist.
Yeah. And of course, we couldn't sell our wine, we couldn't sell our lobsters, we couldn't have any relationship with China when we actually said maybe it is, as Donald Trump calls it, the China virus. Look, either way, they just should have rung up Shari Markson. She had it sorted out years ago. Whatever happened in Wuhan made all the sense in the world, but it's great that it's now official. And the US House of Reps has belled the cat. But, a lot of relationships, a lot of professional circumstances, and a lot of families were hurt by the overreach of what now seems to have been a completely man-made pandemic. And, these are things that back when I was hosting my own show on this network, I never said go and get a jab. I just said talk to your doctor because it struck me as the most sensible thing. But there are others who were just saying get the jab, get the jab, get the jab on all media. I mean, I think a lot of us got conned, or a lot of people got conned into believing the science. And now we find out the science might well have been contrived. It's great to have the confirmation. I just think there should be a full-blown Royal Commission type inquiry into how we handled it here in Australia, because a lot of politicians, some getting statues right now, really should hang their head in shame for the way they handled things during that time.
Gary Hardgrave, thanks for your time tonight.